Hello, everybody, and welcome to Theology 101. Today we are going to look at the book of Ecclesiastes. The book of Ecclesiastes is the 20th book of the Old Testament. The Hebrew Bible has 3 sections: the law, prophets, and writings. The law contains the first 5 books of the Old Testament. The prophets is made up of 8 books divided into the former prophets and the latter prophets. And the writings consist of religious poetry and wisdom literature. Now there are 5 books of the Old Testament that are read at the 5 major Jewish festivals: Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and Esther. These scrolls follow Job and precede Daniel in the writings section of the Old Testament. So we see that Ecclesiastes is one of the 5 books that were read at the 5 major Jewish festivals. The word Ecclesiastes is the Latin translation of the Hebrew word Koheleth, which refers to a teacher or preacher of a congregation. This term refers to the author of this book. Traditionally, the title Koheleth is associated with Solomon, since the verb form of this word appears multiple times in 1 Kings chapter 8, where Solomon gives a speech at the dedication of the temple. There are several facts about this teacher that leads people to think that he is Solomon. He is called David's son, who ruled in Jerusalem. He describes his great wealth, wisdom, and the numerous women who were his, just like Solomon. However, there are some reasons why others do not think Solomon is the author of this book. Why doesn't Solomon ever identify himself as the author of this book and use a title, namely Koheleth, instead? It will make more sense for Solomon to use his name, since he already was regarded with respect by the time of the writing of this book. Another reason why people doubt Solomon as the author of this book is because most scholars consider dating to be much later than the time of Solomon, based on the type of Hebrew that is used. At the end of the day, we do not know for certain who the author is or the dating of this book. Now, the structure of Ecclesiastes has 3 parts. The first part, the prologue, Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verses 1 through 11, sets a depressing tone for the book. It anticipates the teacher's conclusions by introducing some of his favorite phrases, such as all is vanity and that there is nothing new under the sun. The second section, Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verses 12 to chapter 12 verses 7, is the longest part. It is an autobiography of the teacher in which he talks about his futile search for meaning. The last part, namely the epilogue, is Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verses 8 to 14. It is probably the most important part of this book, as the teacher provides his conclusion after his search for meaning in life. So the purpose of Ecclesiastes is to provide a defense for living a life of faith in a generous God, even while living in a broken world. In other words, it is an essay in apologetics that provides an alternative way to live to the typical philosophies of the world. With this purpose in mind, let me give you an overview of Ecclesiastes. The author begins with pessimism and describes the different problems a person encounters in life. He explains how living for this world, or secularism, ultimately fails in the end. Anything accomplished in life is short-lived, and nobody will remember it in the end. Then he moves on to the failure of living for wisdom. Gaining wisdom and knowledge only leads to more sorrow and pain, because a person is only made more aware of the brokenness in life and the world. Then he moves on to the failure of living for pleasure, and concludes that even after accumulating and experiencing everything a person can imagine, he says that it is all vanity and chasing after the wind. Then he comments on the uncertainty of life and how anything he accomplishes will be given to another person after his death. What is the purpose of working so hard only for it to be enjoyed by somebody else who never worked for it? Then the teacher provides an alternative to the pessimism one experiences in life. He says that there is nothing better for a person than to live by faith and enjoy everything God has given to them. Also, living a life of faith in God includes trusting in His control and providence over all seasons of life. It is to trust that God has a purpose and place for everything, suggesting that living a life enjoying what God has created is God's gift to mankind. This leads to living considering God's future judgment. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. Because of this future reality and the fact that all people will die, the teacher concludes that one can only rejoice in the lot given to him by God. The teacher then transitions to observations regarding life under the sun. He observes the brokenness people experience in life, such as injustice, and oppression. Again, I saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun. And behold, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors, there was power, and there was no one to comfort them. One of the themes he highlights regarding the brokenness he witnesses under the sun is the issue of poverty and wealth. He has already stated how he chased after money and how it is all vanity, but here he re-emphasizes this point by concluding this regarding money. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity. Instead of chasing after wealth, especially at the exploitation of others, the teacher concludes an alternative. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment in all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. The teacher moves on to the topic of suffering and sin. He summarizes suffering this way. In my vain life, I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing. Thus he concludes that even striving to be righteous in this world is meaningless, since life is not fair, and we will suffer even when we do what is right. This leads to the topic of authority and injustice. The only relief the teacher finds, considering all the injustice and abuse of power he witnesses, is that every person will eventually die. Death is the great equalizer, which is why the teacher concludes that this is the only logical conclusion to life. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life that he has given you under the sun, because this is your portion in life, and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Then the final area of life the teacher comments on is how wisdom is better than folly. Considering all the brokenness in life under the sun, the teacher comes to his final conclusions. He calls the reader to have faith in God, especially since life is so unpredictable. Then he calls the reader to live with joy, especially in one's youth, while also remembering that God will bring all people into judgment. Then he concludes by calling the reader to remember God, since chasing after anything this world has to offer is vanity. So the main message from Ecclesiastes is that life is vanity apart from God. The word vanity literally means breath and has the idea of being temporary. Whether one is rich or poor, powerful or oppressed, wise or foolish, all people will face death, and everything accomplished in this life will not last. Therefore, the only logical conclusion is to live life with faith in our Creator and to enjoy whatever he has given us today. Thank you to today's sponsor, Awe and Reverence. They offer a free digital worship music app called Maskill. If you want to find out more, I'll leave some links below in the description box. If you missed the last video about the book of Proverbs, I'll leave a link here for you to watch. And until next time, see you.